Hey YouTube, long time listener, first time caller. Amanda did her question and answer, and I figured I'd answer the same questions. Give her a little break, just got home from work. Usually I try to take Calhoun out, and we do chores 2 hours or so. But, who we are, who I am. Name's Eli. Amanda said I'm 34, but I'm not. She's old, I'm 33. For another 2 months. She mentioned our driving force or what we like to do, and although I completely agree with her on it's a wonderful thing to raise your kids this way, watching Calhoun watch me and do something without me saying anything, thinking that he's not watching me, and then he does it the next time I'm doing that task is amazing. Knowing that his mind isn't idle, isn't watching tablets and those things, because we don't do that. We don't really have time to. But when there is the chance to do that, we don't do it. We're busy almost all summer. We're inside in the winter more than we are in the summer. But I get home from my day job as a truck driver and spend 2 to 5 hours outside doing chores, fixing something, doing something, whatever there's time for practically. Our practices, as Amanda said, is regenerative, is pasture raised, and it is all about soil health. However, parts that she didn't mention or didn't go into depth that I like going into a ton more depth on is, if you know me, if you've heard me talk long enough, right, wrong, or indifferent, unfortunately, I'll say nature provides what nature needs. And I don't think you should really look too much further than that. KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And I don't want to bash large agriculture ever. We need to feed people. And they make it very romantic to do it in a scale that is chemical heavy, tillage heavy. And there is guys out there doing it different ways, and they're doing wonderful things. And even the farmers that are doing it with a lot of tillage, they're feeding a lot of people. And that's wonderful. However, across the board, if nothing else hasn't shown you in the last 3 years or whatever it was, we've got to make it more local, and we need to have the relationship with our food, but also with the person that makes your food, and make it a closed system where it can't be interrupted like it was drastically 2 to 3 years ago. So with what we do, it is regenerative, it is pasture raised, and to go into depth of that, and you don't want the soil compaction, as Amanda said, you don't want the animals staying on the same ground, but we don't need to introduce a bunch of antibiotics and other things like that because everything is resting. If we touch the same ground in a year, surprising. Typically the birds aren't going to, especially with this new setup. Before we were renting ground, and that was labor intensive, time intensive, couldn't be there for a storm and all sorts of things necessarily. A ton of commuting, taking the birds from a brooder and having to move them out to a pasture that wasn't here. It wasn't a 2-minute ride or whatever. It was more stress than we wanted. Still a lot better than different ideas, but it wasn't perfect. But here, the goal is possibly someday that everything that we grow is bred here. So it's born, it's grown, and it's butchered here. That's going to take some licensing and things like that, but we hope to do that because we don't want to be the cheapest, we want to be the best. And so the ultimate goal for all of our practices would to be to breed and harvest that animal and do it regeneratively, where we're building the soil, it's making better feed, it's making better land, it's going to be better for every generation, and then hopefully it's inspiring people to think about doing it that way too, and to share more of that to make insight, because it's very easy to follow the masses and not think about your food and keep up with the Joneses and do all sorts of things, but it's not a wonderful system, and maybe we all would take things less for granted, appreciate them more, understand them more, respect them more, and waste them less. I think it would be humongous if we spent a little more time in public schools or other things, showing waste and showing different things. You know, my point there is we even look at what kind of packaging we're using. We try to make every input and output make sense environmentally, locally, sustainably. And as far as animals, like Amanda said, we're now able to do beef, bovine. We've done the pigs. Now doing the pigs in the woods was awesome. Hopefully Amanda can insert some of those clips into this video, and maybe we can do more of that, be better at that as we learn. I hopefully don't have to do any editing, because I'm going to stink at it more than talking probably. And then we do the turkeys. Like Amanda said, we do turkeys once a year currently. Maybe that'll increase when we can offer them differently. Currently, only whole is feasible. So we do our turkeys in July, and they're butchered the weekend before Thanksgiving for our customers and ourselves, so that they don't have to be frozen, they're fresh. We think that's huge. It takes a lot of work. And there again, some customers don't understand that when you're starting 16 weeks ahead, the weather, the protein in the grass, the drought or heavy rain, all those things are going to change how that bird grows. And that's not a customer's fault. I'm not going to expect to know what an architect knows when I hire an architect. But I think changing that where we all understand it better would do volumes for small farms and everybody, and make us appreciate it more and differently. And when we do take the time to explain to customers, and we always do, we're never rude or anything by any means, but when the time is there, the question's asked and we explain it, you can see that they understand and they wish they had thought about it or known that. They're not trying to be a pain in the butt. They're trying to learn it as well as us. And then chickens, obviously, we enjoy chickens. And to step back, I guess, before what the driving force was, I am one of 5 boys. My mom struggled with not feeling well. She's allergic to the house cat we had growing up. It all started, I would say, somewhere around elementary school or middle school, and it really wasn't figured out till after I graduated, I think. She just was sick. It just didn't feel well, and nothing was working, nothing was helping. And then finally, after years and more going a holistic route, they figured out she was celiac, which is more than gluten. It's more in depth. And so she started feeling better, and she was moving in the right direction with that. However, there was still things that were triggering, and the more research, she figured out that there was enough gluten and different preservatives and things that was affecting her. So she couldn't source meat that wouldn't trigger her. And had to kick the ball. Wouldn't set her off, and then she figured out that there was gluten in some of the preservatives they were using in the meat. It was a small enough ratio or number or whatever that it wasn't on the packaging. So I had already started buying my meat from a friend of mine that was growing their own because his wife had MS issues, and also the organic gluten-free option was working better for her. I was buying my meat from him. Delicious, not actually doing anything healthy for myself, but I bought my chicken from him because it sounded good and it was great. And I asked him if he would be available to grow for my mom, and in that case he said he really didn't have room for another customer. So bam, it all started. And as most people know, chickens are the, what do they call it, the gateway drug to animals. So I started growing meat birds before Amanda and me got together. For a year or 2 or 3, I can't remember. And after me and Amanda got together, she was willing to follow some of my ideas, which immediately when we got together was the pasture idea, taking them out of the barn. I was growing them in a large area, more than big area than they would get in a conventional style chicken indoors. However, it still wasn't outdoors. So Amanda, my dad was retiring that year. We built our first chicken tractor. We did it on pasture. We got our first livestock guardian dogs. My dad actually did most of the chores. We tried to help, but he was more willing to do it than making us drive. So it was just me going there in the afternoons, not the mornings, a lot of afternoons, not every afternoon. And he would move them every day. We'd get the feed, we'd do all the butchering, we'd move the birds there, take the birds out for butchering, and go there on the weekends and help move the electric fence and everything. But he did a lot of the labor, the day-to-day labor, the feeding and morning and night, and the moving. And then we just grew it from there. He only did it 1 year, and then we rented land after that wasn't too far from our house, but it was still a drive. And on the pasture operation, especially with chickens or turkeys not so much when they get older because they last longer. They're 16 weeks versus 8 weeks. The chickens they'll huddle when a storm comes in. So I spent a lot of time out on pasture in storms I shouldn't be there, strapping things down so they don't blow away. So there's all that goes into what we do as well. That is a romantic idea of growing birds in a barn. However, we don't think it's worth it. Long story short, so that's why I started growing my own meat, mostly for my mother, but also for myself, and then built customer base. Me and Amanda started growing it. We grew it remarkably, really, in 1 year. And from there, we learned more, started that rabbit hole of understanding the food system and the things you can't unlearn from Netflix documentaries and everything else. And so it grew and grew and grew. And we kept growing, chickens being the gateway. Then we did, obviously I wanted to do pork, and then we did goats, did our own milk, and we were milking, and we had the kids, and Amanda was making cheese and everything else. But we didn't have the land. We needed more land, COVID, everything else. It was hard. Finally, this opportunity presented itself to move up here with the work, and it fell together really well. The land is better than we thought it was. As far as for what it is, to see it, the woods, and the barn, like Amanda said, the round barn, we hope we can save that barn. We've worked on it. As far as the difference between our different roles, like Amanda said, Amanda keeps the house in great condition for an old house. Does a wonderful job at raising our children, and is the patience, the love, the gentle side of all of this operation, with her background in the veterinary and animal clinic side. Buddy, can you get that, please? Sorry, had to get my son off of a office chair that scrolls around because I did that as a kid, landed on a Lego, ripped my nose off. So Amanda's the nice, the pretty, the wonderful side of this farm. Does most of the customer interactions, the emails, the technical. And I am the grunt, hard labor, fixing, doing all those things so that she can do the stuff she's good at, and I guess I'm good at. I do the fixing, the figuring out, the thinking side of what we're going to do, how it'll work. Amanda's significantly brighter than me in so many ways. She has her strong points, I have mine. More of like the scheduling or knowing this is coming and preparing for it. And, having the brooder ready and getting those things and doing the feed, getting the feed here, unloading the feed, all of those things. And we mesh it together pretty well. I spend way too much time thinking about things. If you can ask my friends, it was probably a 3-week saga of how to figure out how to have one thermostat for the house that would control the propane in case the new wood boiler stopped working for some reason and I needed propane to come back on. I was convinced in 2023 or 22 that it should be an easy option. There was fairly easy options, and they just didn't work well enough. And I ended up with 2 thermostats on my well, which I thought was the stupidest thing. Point being, I spent a ton of time researching how we're going to get something done, what's the best way to do it, what's the best equipment for us to efficiently move the farm forward What do you need? We need more screwdrivers for whatever we're working on. To move the farm forward, to be efficient, to continue to grow the farm, which is all of our input. Amanda mentioned that we don't make any, and although we don't make much, the margins are small, but any margins we have, pretty much this whole farm operation just goes back into it. You know, this farm is a tremendous expenditure, but the infrastructure is never stopping. I mean, there's no hydrants here. There's the fencing all has to be redone. It's overgrown. It's unmanaged. Barns need roofs. The whole house needs stuff. Not that the house is part of the farm, but it is. We have nowhere for our meat storage. That's all licensed. That's a licensed facility that we have to hit certain requirements to be able to be licensed to hold the meat to sell it to you. Even though it's done through USDA Butcher, we still have to have freezers in a location that can be licensed, fits the requirements, that we can then house it to then take it back out to sell it to you. So that all takes money, and it takes a lot of our time and a lot of our money. So time, money, it all goes back in to just keep this growing. Someday we'll probably be closer to green, but it'll be a long time from here. The growth that we've done moving here, which was humongous, we worked on it since the end of January, finally got clear to close the end of March. There were so many hoops to jump through there because just like getting an appraisal with the market and everything else was just darn near impossible. So moving this whole farm finally got clear to close. So we had April. I was supposed to be to work with my new job the second week of April. We couldn't close until the 8th finally. So we moved up here that weekend. I went to work like Monday, and we had our daughter on the way due in May. It was just such a short window, and amazing that I think semi-amazing that we did it, because I mean we weren't moving a household, we were moving a whole farm, which is equipment. Though we downsized our animals, unfortunately got rid of the goats, we still had the layers and 5 dogs and leftover hay that we couldn't sell for a reasonable amount, and just everything that goes with that. Chicken tractor, wood. We had our firewood ready in a mobile scenario where we could be able to move it up here. And so that all got done amazingly. Had fern, that was a window. We needed to get a garden ready. We did get the garden ready, which was raised bed finally, which was permaculture that we were just looking forward to doing so much. We were in this transition for 3 years of, do we do this, or are we going to finally be able to find a property that'll work for us and move? And we knew there was 2 or 3 things that if we finally just did them, we would find the right property. One of them was finishing the fence completely, making a couple different paddocks, even though it was 2 acres, that worked, where we could move things around, keep things around, do the LGD dogs separate than our indoor dogs, and garlic was the second. I feel like there was a third, but anyway, we planted garlic the October before we moved, and I knew we'd finally move because of that, and sure as butt, we did. So permaculture wasn't really happening there because we just didn't put the effort into it. I would just rototill and we'd make a new bed, but now we finally have the area that can be devoted to it and keep it the same and continue to use those beds and continue to add to those beds and not have to rototill it and manage them correctly to build the soil health. So got the garden in. I started working on the garden the day Fern was born, because Amanda's amazing in that way, where she was pretty good, and I was shook up because our midwife didn't make it. We do a home birth. We did a home birth for Calhoun, and we did a home birth for Fern. And luckily, our midwife from downstate was willing to transition up here with us and hopefully deliver. But she didn't make it with the 2-hour some drive by the time Amanda delivered. And it was me, Calhoun, and Amanda delivering Fern. And I like things I can fix. I don't like things that I don't know how to fix. And that was scary. So I was shook up and needed to like do what I needed to do, which was I started making the garden that day to get my mind off of that. Not to get my mind off of my daughter by any means, but that scenario where that's the guy that was supposed to be in charge? I don't know. It all went wonderful. Anyway, so we put the garden in, got that going for Amanda. Like she mentioned, we bought plants. After that, just kept cleaning up the property, finding new things in the grass that hadn't been maintained in years, metal and all sorts of stuff, and trying to recover some areas and get the barn cleaned out to move the chickens into it better. And then we made the area for the steers we got. Just keep trying to use the things around here to make it a little bit cheaper. And then got the area ready for the birds, started brooding the birds this year for the chickens, and did the turkeys. Got those done, I think we did like 30 or 40 turkeys, 70 chickens. And it's amazing, up until we finally got snow that would stick, that grass is so green out in that field compared to everything else, even now in the middle of January. Got the outdoor boiler installed, which was humongous because we feared how bad this house would be. And so far it's working wonderful, heating the whole house, and I keep it warm, 74 to 76 degrees. Only using 9 totes of wood so far, which is pretty amazing in my opinion. I think better than we used to do with our indoor attic furnace. Fixed up the front porch quite a bit. Like Amanda said, the new front door. Moved around the kitchen to take out a wall and make it a lot bigger. Move the appliances around. Got all new water pipes in there. There's galvanized. So took all that out, put in a manifold. You'll see behind Amanda in some of the videos, their seed starting. Put in PEX stall, those things. Obviously had the boiler run in there. Boiler, new water heater, and the boiler heats the domestic water as well as the whole house. And since then, it's just maintaining and cutting firewood pretty much this winter. Put these lights up in the barn because there's only one light. That's hard. There's 3 of those. Not bright enough to actually work out here. So picking away at stuff we can pick away at while it's winter. Still relax a little bit. Try to recharge. But right about January hits and you start doing all your ordering for things you need, figuring out dates, which is really difficult to try to get away and have birds starting where, we don't want to start birds in a brooder while we're going on vacation. I mean, they need a lot of attention. And then, figuring out butcher dates and what butcher we're going to use. I mean, there's literally only 2 options, pretty much practical for us here in Michigan. I'm sure there's more, but want to go with Mama? There's only a few options that we can do, and they're both over 2 hours away, so that's going to take some planning, that drive and everything. But it's all part of it. It gets the blood going. It gets you excited for this year and moving forward and making this property better. Also started ripping out some of the fence this winter when it was nicer than it wasn't. Put in a cow fence for those cows. We did do that, I forgot to mention. And it should be a great year. Luckily, we got Amish around, which is super helpful. It's a neighborhood. It's a community feeling that is like nothing else. So that's really exciting as far as butchering and stuff. They should be able to help with that. So last thing I think, minus touching on nature provides what nature needs. I think that's a huge thing that says most about us, where we try to think about it in a simple way. Give them fresh air. That's what it's about. It's about the least amount of time that animal has to be indoors, getting vitamin D, getting bugs, getting all those things that are naturally part of their diet and natural. And not introducing things, not working against nature. We have LGD, livestock guardian dogs, so that coyotes don't come in. I don't want to interrupt what the coyotes are doing. The coyotes are taking care of predators I don't want to worry about. And I don't want to take something out of that system, out of that cycle. I want to be part of it. and I want the animals to do what they naturally do. I don't want to fight it. I want to work with it, and I want to feed them what they need to be fed and to let them act like natural animals, because they are. Though we do Cornish cross chickens, which is a hybrid, some will say, for a meat bird, they're just bred to be a fast-growing meat bird. We've found a hatchery where we like the animal. We like the bird that we get. It grows well. It doesn't have heart attacks, because that's a mortality rate issue bird for most people. But if you manage them correctly, they're not. We have less than 3 in 150 die in a good batch all the time. So we want to work with nature. We don't want to introduce all the antibiotics and everything else because you're growing them so close together, or they're not letting the ground rest, and there's everything in the bacteria, the fecal, and all the bugs and everything else. You let that rest and you let other things eat it. You let the bugs eat it. You let the chickens eat the bugs out of the fecal. You let all of those things work together. It makes the soil better. It makes the grass better. It makes the cow eat better grass. It's just a cycle that keeps working together, and we want to be part of that. And as far as the pros and cons, they're like Amanda said. I mean, the pros are endless as far as our family. It's just rewarding to get home and be part of that. The first time you butcher your own chickens, or the first time you can eat your own meat, or even your garden, your tomato, you won't feel, it's an unstoppable feeling, and it radiates through it. First time me and Amanda butchered our own chickens, it just was incredible. We were exhausted, but it was incredible. And I wish we could share that with a million people. And I love sharing what works and doesn't work, because why struggle through it? And it's time to go check on Calhoun. The pros, I think, outweigh the cons. The cons are frustrating. It's frustrating to not be able to take off whenever you want, because you've got animals to take care of. But it just takes planning. It takes a community. It takes knowing decent people, paying a fair rate for them to help, and just trusting in them. But we don't do it a ton because it's not enjoyable. Like I was saying, the pros, I think, outweigh the cons. I think the biggest cons is just you're not free to do whatever you want, which I think is good for the kids, is good for us to have the responsibility. We just can't take off whenever. We got to be home at such and such times, and that makes family things a little bit harder. And vacations. But with a good community, or paying a fair wage, it is easier to find good people to care for the animals. And not that we're untrustworthy. I think we would rather be here to care for the animals, to not wonder, not fear, not to be disrespectful to anybody that's ever watched our animals, but just to know they're being done properly or whatever. And it's not $1 million career, but it's enjoyable. It's what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, this is the barn. It'll probably be a minute before Amanda's willing to show you guys. Unfortunately, maybe I'll get better at that. There's water hole in the roof. And there's a large one over here, which has created issues. It's made the floor fall in over here, which is unfortunate. We did put a new beam in here because that was rotted out, which was making these beams sag. And we put a chain across the top to hold it in. It's just an amazing barn. That's actually its second roof. Amanda's better at dates, but I want to say 1926. I want to say the roof blew off in a storm. So it's expensive. The previous owners did stuff, but I think towards the end it was harder to get people to do stuff and find the finances for it. So a few years, things have fallen apart. But we've been working with a few guys that are barn builders, and we've spent a chunk of hours out here doing a few things. Above the main door, we put that 2x12 what they put in because these two headers, one was falling off the post, and my father was actually here that day with two or three other barn builders that really enjoy the barn and really want to put it back together. The problem is that we threw everything we had at buying this property, almost everything we had at. We did not have a budget for repairing a round barn, so we look forward to trying to find ways to make other revenue streams and maybe do donations and things like that, like Amanda had stated, to get some money to restore this and enjoy it with people. We'd really like for this to be part of the community and part of Michigan still, because I mean the stories we've heard since owning it of just people that they always thought about it, they knew they were close to home traveling or whatever it may be. The stories are just endless on it, and I'm surprised Amanda didn't notice it when we first saw it, but she was pretty pregnant, and I saw it because I look at satellite when we were looking at all million properties, and I couldn't figure out what would be round like that in an aerial satellite picture. But a few interesting things about the round barn that is completely getting out of a question and answer video is why would you do a round barn? And a few of the reasons is that it's a cow takes up more space at its shoulders than its rear end, and that you feed them in the center, and your waste would all be on the outside, your feed would all be on the inside, and there would be a trolley. So this is, the worst place where the floor is collapsed. But you would have a trolley, and you can see it here, that would have a cart that you would run around the whole outside and be able to pick up the manure, and they would all be fed on the inside. Simply ridiculous. The idea behind it, I mean, just never would have thought about it, really. It was also a sign of wealth, but it made a lot of sense because a lot of them had silos in the center of them. So your feed would all be in the center. Just remove your manure around the outside. You can see that 1907. This wall's been replaced, which is actually nice block work. It would be a lot nicer if it was stone. But it'll be a wonderful property. We're doing what we can. And yeah, those are a few of my questions and answers that I thought were a little bit a part of what we are and why we are. So thanks for tuning in. Please like and subscribe so we can try to build this channel and spread what we do. Have a good day.